Oh, hi. It gives me unalloyed pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you. It's a great privilege. My thanks to the organisers. When I was a schoolboy a few years back, I was... what are you laughing at? I was fascinated by mountains. I absolutely loved mountains. And I knew that in the future I was going to be a world-famous mountain explorer. I hadn't actually seen a mountain at that time, but I knew all about them. I read lots of books on mountains, and I prepared myself for my career as a world-famous mountain explorer by learning about the techniques of mountain climbing, about rock climbing, the stuff you do with ropes and pitons, all of that. And I really got very knowledgeable about it. The day came when I actually, age 18, I saw my first mountain. I got into the north of England, the Lake District, and I selected what looked to me like an intermediate rock face and rehearsed in my mind everything I had learnt about rock climbing, and I started off up the rock face. I discovered to my surprise that the rocks had not read the same books. And in fact, I was hopeless at it. No good at all. And that's why I didn't become a world-famous mountain climber and became a teacher of English instead. Not nearly as exciting. It was a bit the same with languages. I was very, very good at French at school. I used to come top in all the exams in French. Curiously, for a couple of years, we had a French boy in my class. He used to come bottom in the exams. And I should have wondered about the methodology at the time. But fact was, he didn't know much English, and he couldn't spell English or French, so he couldn't do any of the exam questions. But anyway, I was terrific. And I was really a very good linguist, expert at French, until the day came, years later, when I went to France for the first time. And I discovered that the French had not learnt their French from the Clarendon French course. And they talked it much too fast and got it all wrong. And I concluded that the trouble with languages is very largely the native speakers. If it wasn't for them, everything would be fine. They talk too fast, they don't follow the rules, they're a nuisance. Well, later on I did actually live in France for quite some time, and by the end of my few years there, I was pretty fluent in French, I was very good at slang, I could swear fluently in French. I was pretty proud of myself. That was some time ago, and if I go back to France now, I find, to my annoyance, that they have changed a whole lot of things without consulting me. My slang, if I try my French slang, they give me those looks. Sort of, what planet has this guy come from? Well, it's not a big problem for me because I'm not a French teacher. But of course, this kind of thing is a very big problem, or appears a very big problem, for teachers of languages which are not their own particularly. Things change, things don't follow the rules, and they worry, what should we do about this? What should we think about it? What should we do about it? There's a couple of language teachers worrying. They're worrying because they've been reading an English newspaper and they found a use of the present perfect with a past time adverb that contradicts what they've got in their books. And, if this worry can turn into full-scale panic. There's a teacher who was walking past McDonald's and saw I'm loving it. And, well, what I want to talk about this afternoon is some of the things that are happening in modern English and what teachers can or should do about it. some things that are happening. What should teachers do? Languages change. All languages change. Your languages of people in this room were not the same 200 years ago or 100 years ago. They're changing now. Change in all sorts of ways. One way in which languages change is that language systems reorganize themselves, particularly complicated systems. Think of English modal verbs, must, may, can, might, those. Differences between them are subtle and complex, and they move around. They reorganize themselves a bit. Here's something that my daughter might say to me. Imagine my daughter comes to stay with us, and I want to prove that I'm still as fit as I was in my 20s, and so I go and climb a tree in the garden. I get back down from the tree, somehow still alive, and my daughter says, "Dad, that was a crazy thing to do. You may have killed yourself." Now, I couldn't say that to somebody who's alive. In my English, you may have killed yourself means perhaps you killed yourself. I would have to say, you might have killed yourself. You could have. It was possible, but it didn't happen. But that little bit of English is changing, and younger people now say may have to mean something was possible, but it didn't happen. I only use may have to mean perhaps it did happen. Little change, maybe not very important, but that's an example of the kind of thing that happens. Small distinctions between words or structures sometimes just disappear. Here's an American election slogan some time back. Who did you vote for? Well, in old grammar books, it's supposed to be whom. But whom is dying. Whom's disappearing. Difference between who and whom, it's on the way out. And that kind of thing is common in language. Small distinctions disappear. Older grammar books also have very clear differences between shall and will. And perhaps you've learnt that stuff about I shall, you will, he will, etc. Well, shall is on the way out, shall is dying, and most people now use will for the future in all three persons. That little distinction is disappearing. It's annoying for us teachers, actually, because we learn this stuff, and we put a lot of effort into learning it, and then it isn't there anymore. I put enormous effort into learning about German spelling years back, and then the Germans changed their spelling rules without consulting me. And all that effort, that emotional, intellectual effort, has gone for nothing, down the drain. I'm very angry about it. Another thing in English, little distinction that's disappearing, like and as. What you read in the older grammar books about the difference between like and as isn't quite true anymore. Another mechanism of language change is sound change. Sounds get weaker and disappear as the years and centuries go by. English used to have an awful lot of endings. We used to have nominative, accusative, genitive, dative endings on nouns. We had lots and lots of endings, and over the years we've decided that they're a bit of a nuisance and we've got rid of them. Some languages, for reasons I don't understand, have still got them. One reason why they disappear is that they're not very strongly stressed, and they get quieter and quieter until they're not there. You might hear this. It looks wrong, but that's what people say. I better. You don't hear I'd better very much. You hear I better. This happens with going to, is gonna, want to, wanna, got to, gotta, have to, have to. I say things like, did you see John yesterday? I don't say, did you see John? When do you hear, did you see John yesterday? On the CD-ROM of a language course. Nowhere else. Did you see John yesterday? Dunno. Can't remember. We've been out. I don't say we've been out. We've been out. In American English, got is turning into a full verb to got, because the V in I've got has gone in quick speech. So it's become I got, and you hear people saying, do you got? I think the English auxiliary system in 50 or 100 years will look very different because of these sound changes. What else happens? New forms come into the language. Particularly younger people like to put their own stamp on a language, so they bring in new forms, partly to confuse older people. You've probably all heard this very funny way of introducing indirect speech. He was like, what do you mean? He was like, meaning he said, but it's becoming very common. 20 years back, only quite young people said it. I think it came into British English from American. Now it's certainly moved up the generations. I don't think I've heard myself say it, but I've heard my wife say it. So it's sooner or later it's going to be a quite common way of saying he said, she said. It's odd, isn't it? Another new form that's coming into English is we're reinventing the difference between second person singular and second person plural. You know, way back we had singular thou, plural ye or you, and the difference disappeared. Well, it looks like people want it back. It still exists in dialects. It never died out of dialects. So in Scotland, north of England, some parts of Ireland, people say yous, plural, and you, singular. In southern United States, they have a second person plural pronoun, y'all, and the singular is you, a systematic difference. But in standard English, the distinction disappeared, and it's coming back. If you listen to people saying things like you folks or you guys doesn't mean you men. You guys is just grammaticalized second person plural pronoun. So we're getting that distinction back. These things happen in all languages. Things change. Prestige varieties of a language influence the other varieties. At the moment, well, back in the good old days when Britain ruled a lot of the world, it was British English that people felt they ought to imitate. Not now, it's American English. American English influences other varieties. British English gets a little more American every year. People get upset about it and write to the newspapers complaining. I don't care. I can't afford to care because my wife's American. It doesn't seem to me that it matters. For instance, I say railway station. A lot of younger British people say train station, which is American, but now it's American and British. And one other thing that happens is that mistakes get made and spread through the language until in the end they're not really mistakes anymore because they've just become part of the language. Here's a couple of mistakes that people fuss about at the moment. One is the apostrophe. I got a Christmas card with Season's greetings on it. I think it was from a language school. Seasons didn't have an apostrophe, but greetings did, which I thought was rather nice. Women's Services is on a notice outside the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. I really like that. The signwriter wasn't quite sure where to put the apostrophe, so I thought it'd be safe and put it in both places. And people are so mixed up about apostrophes now that maybe the whole thing will disappear. I hope so. The possessive apostrophes are an invention of about 600 years back, and they're an absolute nuisance. We'd be better off without them. The other one, a concerted effort,